I have a few clients who I'm working with right now that are just building monster businesses. They are incredibly profitable. They're not necessarily that big, and that's actually one of the interesting things about them. Overall, they're, give or take in the 8-figure range, right? Or early-ish 8 figures. That's the brands that I tend to like to work with most. Started somewhere between 2 and 5 million, want to get to 20 plus. And I love to be there for that part of the journey. It's my favorite part of the e-commerce journey. And so the brands that I'm with are kind of all in that range in some way. So nothing super crazy. But some of these businesses I'm starting to see are building just like monster bottom line profits. And that is both as a raw dollar amount by any objective measure. They're building incredibly profitable businesses. Not even though the total business is not necessarily that big, it's pretty big, but not that big. The bottom line is just huge on some of these businesses. And they're building that partly because they have huge percentage profits. And the longer that I work with them, the more that I've been thinking about what are the elements of these businesses that are just so good. Why are these businesses doing so well? And that has gotten me really pushing or getting my mind around what I want to sort of do in this episode, which is think really carefully about, for the D2C businesses that actually are really profitable and generating really good businesses, like what is making them do that? Why are they so profitable? Because these businesses that I'm thinking of are different in many ways. They're different categories, they're different margin profiles, they're different LTV profiles. The similarities that they're spending a lot of money on meta ads, right? That's why they're working with me, and that's just selection bias. It's certainly not the only way to build a profitable business, but the kind of business that works with me and my services is because they want meta to be a part of that. So that's the similarities. They see that as a core driver of growth, and they're focusing on that, and we're building around that. But otherwise, there's a lot of differences in a lot of different ways. And yet this thing that unites them is building really good, profitable businesses. And of course, at the same time, I've also seen plenty of businesses that have come through, including ones that have worked with me, that are not profitable, that are really struggling, that are losing money, etc. And that has me asking the same question, like, what are the similarities between those brands? Why are they not profitable? And where I want to start this conversation in this episode is with one idea that is probably so obvious to you when I say it that I think is actually the key to this, like the cornerstone of this whole thing. This one observation that I think is actually the key that again sounds so obvious that maybe you will wonder why I'm even bothering to say it, let alone record a whole episode around it. Okay. And here is that observation. You ready? The thing that makes great, profitable e-commerce brands really great is this: they relentlessly pursue profit. Now, like I said, that sounds so obvious that it barely sounds worth saying. But the more that I've thought about this, the more that I think that it is not obvious at all to many people. I think brands that relentlessly pursue profit tend to generate a lot of it. And the thing is, if you think right away, well, like, come on, Andrew, everybody is pursuing profit. What does that have to do with me or with anybody else? Like I want profit too. That's why I'm listening to your show. That's why I'm watching your show. What is that? That's not insightful at all, right? That's what it might sound like. But I want you to start to think for a second about why a brand that is relentlessly pursuing profit actually is able to generate a whole lot of it, and why a brand that's relentlessly pursuing profit would not be able to generate a whole lot of it. Okay. So let's ask it in the negative. Why would they not be able to generate a bunch of profit if that's what they're relentlessly pursuing? And there are a couple of answers that could come to mind. Okay. One of them is perhaps that they are just sort of stuck with the wrong vehicle for profit, right? Something about the core of their business is just not set up to produce profit in the way that they would want to. And that something is typically some combination of sort of business fundamentals in a financial sense, right? Margin profile, like gross margin, landed to the customer, LTV, something like that. Could be organic content, like customer acquisition strategy, basically. Sort of where they're spending their money and how they're thinking about spending their money on customer acquisition. Could also be total addressable market. I think this is another one that people sort of underplay sometimes, but total addressable market, TAM, is another thing that is, I think, sort of fundamental to what a business is like. To give you a sense of what I mean by that, right? Think about a business as a category creator versus capturing existing demand. there's already a bunch of apparel sold in the world. You think of the big t-shirt companies like that, Cuts or Fresh Clean Threads or True Classic or any of those brands, right? Part of the thing that makes those brands work, very obviously, is that there's a lot of white and black t-shirts sold in the world, and therefore there's a huge and basically endless TAM. Okay, and so that's what I mean. That's core to it. Versus, say, consider somebody launching a niche product into a niche community. There's just going to be only so much of that available. And the business is only going to get so big. Okay. So those are the things I think of as sort of fundamental to the business, right? And so you might say, Andrew, I want to pursue profit, except the problem is these fundamentals to my business just don't work very well. And so, yes, I am relentlessly pursuing profit, but it's not working that well, or at least not generating that much profit. And this is probably a core point. One of the things that strikes me about these clients that I'm thinking of for myself and certainly non-clients of mine, like other brands I've looked at that are really profitable, is they just generate a ton of it. Like the notion that D2C businesses can't be that good or aren't that big or whatever it is just wrong. Like I'm just around very good e-commerce D2C businesses that could sell for a really good multiple off of a really high profit number. They're doing great. It's a hard business in a lot of ways, but you could build a really good business this way. And so, I want to dispel that myth. Like if you relentlessly pursue profit, I think part of the equation here is that you can generate a whole lot of it. So maybe you hear this and say, okay, Andrew, like I'm relentlessly pursuing profit. The problem is the vehicle for profit, my business, the fundamentals of that vehicle are just not very good for it. And so this works against your point. This is an obvious point, except that your point doesn't work here because my thing is I'm sort of stuck with it. And here I would say this precisely illustrates the point that I'm trying to make. Because if you are really relentlessly pursuing profit, then you maybe would just get a different business, or you would make radical changes to your business in a way that would say, okay, if these fundamentals of this business don't work, then I'm going to change the business. I'm going to change my strategy drastically, maybe my channel strategy, or I'm going to change my product strategy or my customer acquisition, or whatever it is. Because the point is, the fundamentals of your business don't happen to you. They're not like your eye color or your hair color, traits of yours that you can, I don't know, maybe go get adjusted or something, but that basically are genetic and inherent and something that you can't do anything about, right? You just have a certain eye color or hair color. That's not what your business's fundamentals are. Your business's fundamentals, your economic fundamentals in your business are choices you made. And every day that you operate your business with those fundamentals is a day that you continue to choose those fundamentals. And this is what I mean by saying relentlessly pursue profit. This is the point. If you relentlessly pursue profit, you will not be willing to stick with those. Now, here we illustrate also another important point in this conversation, in this idea, which is that you may not actually be relentlessly pursuing profit because you care about something else in your business besides profit. Like maybe you know that your business is never going to generate huge amounts of profit, but it is a niche that you love and you care about, and you're willing to not have that much profit in your business because you would rather stay in the niche and make products you love and feel proud of. That's fine. I'm here, I want to just be really clear. I'm making no judgments about that. The point actually is irrespective of anything like about what you actually should do. What you should do with your time in your life actually ladders to some very other questions. And I'll use myself as an example here. Like I've said before, I am not trying to build that big of a business right now. I think all the time about how do I create more profit or more revenue in my business, but there are certain things I'm unwilling to do, including building a large agency. Like at least on that side of things, I am simply not willing to do it. Even if I could, and even if I could have a large financial outcome, I think I would hate that job. I like to be in the work. I like to be doing the work a little bit more. I like to be interfacing with my clients. I like working directly with founders in these businesses. And therefore, for me, I don't want to go a layer up and build processes and build an agency around that, right? So if I was relentlessly pursuing profit in my business, I would probably treat certain elements of the profitability of the business differently, but there's a constraint for me about what I do and don't want to do with my time that's there. If you are already a remote team running a D2C business and you are not considering hiring in the Philippines to add talent to your team, I really mean this, I don't know why. There's a simple value proposition here, which is good for all sides. And it works like this. There is incredible talent with deep e-commerce resumes across every part of D2C e-commerce businesses available in the Philippines. Actually, by the way, I also have folks who work in agency businesses as well. So everyone across the D2C landscape, there is talent available to you. You can pay a premium rate for that talent, but that rate will still be less than you would pay for that talent in the US. And so what that means is you attract the best talent in the Philippines, And the best talent is really, really good. I know because I work with highly talented people from the Philippines in my own business. And at the same time, your costs are much lower than they would be if you try to get especially that same level of talent in the US. It makes sense for everyone. It is a huge win-win. And my friends at More Staffing can help you do it. They're the ones who helped me do it. You go to morenow.co/AF and More Staffing will connect you with incredible talent in the Philippines for your e-commerce business. They will also give you a 1-year guarantee. So if you hire somebody with them, and if that hire does not work out for a whole year, if they don't stick with your whole business for a whole year, they will help you replace that talent for free. So go to morenow.co/AF, build a highly profitable business with help from incredible talent in the Philippines. Now, just to be clear, you may not be relentlessly pursuing profit, but what we should be honest about is that, right? We should be honest about that idea that, and there may be some limitation to your relentlessness about these sorts of things, and that's okay. That's okay. But the point still remains. If you are relentlessly pursuing profit, you can generate a bunch of it, and you will change the things that you need to change. Let me give you, So I think this illustrates my point, is the idea that there are these elements of the business that are fundamental. And if you start pressing down as hard as you possibly can on the relentlessly pursue profit button, you will start to clear away those things and you will not be stuck with them. And maybe to illustrate this further, we can think about what gets in the way of relentlessly pursuing profit. And I'm going to use a framework here to illustrate this point that I thought of and kind of developed into some tweets and to a thread recently as well. And I think it will help us to think through this idea a little bit more about what makes this work. Let's think a little bit about what are the actual enemies of profit in this business. And I want to think less tactically and more strategically in a general, broader sense here, okay? Because I could say, right, like automated bidding on meta ads, right? But I don't want to get down to quite that level. I want to think broadly about how you're approaching the business, okay? So the first one is one I just mentioned, which is like the fundamentals of the business maybe just don't work that well for pursuing generating huge amounts of profits, okay? In that case, you maybe need to make some radical changes in your business. And so that can get in the way of it, okay? Another thing that could get in the way of it, and this is related to that, is actually your channel strategy. And I'm thinking here really specifically of businesses that have a good business in a lot of ways, but they don't make that much sense for D2C. Because this framework of relentlessly pursuing profit in your e-commerce business is meant around this idea of like a D2C business. That's mostly who I'm talking to, okay? But if you can think about this idea and think like, wait a minute, some businesses can generate real profit, but the margin profile or the LTV profile or the TAM or something like that, or the customer acquisition potential, it's just wrong for D2C. So like I actually recently stopped working with a client where there's nothing wrong with the relationship at all. We just looked at things and said, this is the wrong approach to this category for us to generate the most profit possible. And so we're going to actually rethink where we invest our time and effort away from sort of a meta ads driven strategy around a D2C thing, and instead think, no, our goal for generating revenue in this business is going to come from some other elements of the business with different margin profile. I also think back to when I was at 4x400. One business I worked with at 4x400, one of the brands was in a niche space. It was low margin. We could never get out from under shipping costs for the business, okay? And it was because the product was heavy to ship around. And it was fairly low LTV as well. And so you put all those things together and it just made no sense for D2C. It was like less than 50 points of margin landed to the customer all the time. We were fighting between 45 and 50. We had not a particularly large TAM for a bunch of reasons. And the LTV wasn't particularly good. It was actually a consumable product, but people didn't use it that fast. And so they didn't come back and buy more. It lasted for a really long time. And those elements are a bad D2C business. Like they're just not that good D2C business. Now we were able to get it still pretty decently far, but it was never going to produce huge amounts of profits because of those fundamentals in the beginning. And I think if I could have that back, I wouldn't go back and say, get rid of the business. I would just completely change the channel strategy. And actually, one of the members of our team at the time was saying that. He was saying, look, guys, this is just not a D2C business. We just couldn't see it or hear it. D2C was the only thing we really knew. And so we just didn't have that idea. He was saying this is a retail business. You can go find the communities who are most likely to buy this. You can show up in their retail stores. And crucially, if you ship pallets of this stuff at a time, it actually isn't particularly expensive to ship. It's just expensive to ship 1 or 2 or 3 units at a time. And so if you ship a pallet at a time, you get a whole bunch of money back and your retail margin will actually be very close to your D2C margin, which of course is unheard of in D2C because the retailer needs to take a cut. But but most of the cost of the product was not on the cost of goods. It was, at least at the D2C level, it was not the cost of goods. It was in sort of the raw COGS. It was in the price of shipping to the customer, even though we collected shipping dollars and we tried all these things to get the shipping price down, right? And so the best way for us to reach our exact market and to be able to sell at the highest margin and volume possible would have been to push really hard on a retail strategy and try to sell in some stores and some of those things. We just couldn't see that. Point is, now I don't know if it ever would have been a huge business, but it would have been a much better, more profitable business, almost for sure. D2C would have been a part of it, but we never would have relied on it to be quite the same level. And we would have thought much more about how we market into that community and think more carefully around how we make it so that people walk into a store, recognize the product on the shelf, and generate sell-through in our retail relationships that way. And that's the way we would have tried to power the business, right? And to the point there is, part of the thing that you might have to think about in your business, if you're relentlessly pursuing profit, is you may actually have the wrong business for D2C. And therefore, again, you have to go change the whole fundamental strategy of the business. The other example of this I think of all the time is Simple Modern. I've had Brian Porter, the chief e-commerce officer, one of the founders of Simple Modern, one of the guys who launched that brand, on this show. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. Please go back and listen to that episode. It's before I was doing video, so it's audio only, but it's wherever fine podcasts are sold, okay? And Brian talks so brilliantly about that product because that's a low water bottles. It's a low margin product, okay? And it's actually, they're priced on the low end. Like they're not very expensive. And they're lower margin. And so D2C was sort of an afterthought. Instead, they started on Amazon because what they could do is think about price as a lever and volume, TAM, as a lever, and then the ability to generate a whole bunch of variety by launching that business as an Amazon first water bottle business. They could do things that none of their competitors could do, which were built for typically brick and mortar first businesses. And so their whole business was structured around maximizing Amazon as a channel, and they were able to get that to a 9-figure Amazon business, just a monster. I mean, just on Amazon alone, right? They added other channels over time. They found some other ways to expand margin. Now they're, big brick and mortar. Mike Beckham, the CEO of Simple Modern, has been public. They're in the mid 200 millions now total revenue. I worked with them at some point to get on their meta ads as well, but those were supplemental to originally an Amazon launch strategy. Why? Because the actual core to the product made much more sense as an Amazon product where they could capture a bunch of organic demand and make their margin by having extremely low CACs, by winning the price game on Amazon. And therefore they got their margin not at the product level, but essentially at the CAC level. So it's a distribution channel strategy game. Again, the point being, if you were to start Simple Modern today with the same margin profile, you would price the water bottles differently. You would, if you were doing it D2C first, you would think about the whole thing really differently than if you were doing the Amazon first strategy that they did. And again, if you're relentlessly pursuing profit, that's going to lead into that sort of thing. So you may have a decent business, but if you relentlessly pursue profit, then you might at some point look at it and go, I will never get there, D2C. I just will never. It's just not, this is not working for that. It doesn't work very well for that business. And so you would think about some other channels, okay? Another big reason why brands that relentlessly pursue profit don't get there, and this is maybe the other thing that came to your mind when I mentioned this idea, is ignorance, okay? Lack of education. And I'm sensitive to this. I understand this. And I don't mean ignorance. That sounds condescending or negative. I don't mean it that way at all. I just mean you don't know what you don't know. And one of the problems is it requires a real skill set. Okay. And that is a really hard thing to get. So you may be pursuing profit really hard, but you just haven't had enough reps yet to be that good at it. Now, this is my favorite problem. In one respect, this is why the Andrew Ferris podcast exists. This is why I love when people reach out to me and say, like, I feel really satisfied. And when people reach out to me and say, you've really helped my business. Thank you so much. I've had a number of people DM me or email me or whatever. And because I love dealing with founders, I'm not a true entrepreneur's entrepreneur. When I started my own business, it was not very risky. I already had, some Twitter following and a podcast following and people who wanted to work with me. I had a network from working at agencies, all those things. And so it just wasn't a big leap of faith for me. And I wouldn't have pursued it if it was. I'm not quite that kind of guy. Okay. But I like those people. I like them a lot. And when people go and they start their business shipping some product they made out of their living room or whatever, and they're just, boxes in their garage and all that stuff, I think it's awesome. And I love being helpful in those situations. But along the way, you just have to learn. I have had this thing where I started as a media buyer on the brand side. Then I went over to an agency and looked at multiple brands. And I learned very quickly that not every brand worked quite like Kalo, where I had started as a media buyer. Okay. And then I became the head of marketing at Common Thread Collective the head of growth, right, at Common Thread Collective, and was an executive there. And it was like, okay, now I'm seeing more and more brands and I have to figure out how to coach people in this business. And then I went to 4x400, where we owned and operated up to 6 brands at a time. And those brands were all different from one another, from a skincare brand to my baseball glove wallet brand to the one, whatever, all these different brands that had that. And now I've gone and now I've been, running my own freelance and then agency business for the last couple of years, and again have a different set of skills. Well, that represents 10 years of experience. That represents a lot of wins and a lot of failures. And man, I have learned so much from both of those things, and it's just impossible to replace the reps at first. Okay, so if that is you, the key solution to that problem, if you are relentlessly pursuing profit, is twofold. The first is, and this is something I cannot express enough, find the people in your life who will be on that journey with you over some longer amount of time. Do everything you can to get them to be honest with you and to keep a good relationship with them, and then process and analyze as you go and note what you observe, etc. Somebody doing that with you for a long period of time, especially if they're smart and talented and all those things, even if they don't have a ton of experience, right? If they're smart and talented and can analyze over time and can keep building their mental bank of knowledge, can be so incredibly helpful to you and your business. I am incredibly thankful to have done all of my 10 years in some way or another alongside Taylor Holiday. Sometimes formally as people working in the same company for a lot of that time, sometimes kind of technically as business partners, sometimes just as friends, where we can just text or send each other a Marco Polo or video message or whatever it is, get on the phone, talk, have dinner, any of those things, and say, here's what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? Here's what I'm seeing. What are you seeing? And process and process and process. And as we're talking about the things that we are doing in our businesses, where there's wins and there's losses and everything in between, we're able to take those experiences and turn them into intellectual experiential capital in our minds that we can take to the next thing. So that's one thing to help with the ignorance problem. Okay. The other thing you can do, though, is make sure to get the best quality input. And this is another crucial thing that I think is really tough. Okay. Because on top of ignorance, there is also like bad ideas. Bad ideas is its own problem that's sort of related to ignorance, but it's different. There's just like this massive proliferation of information related to e-commerce and D2C growth right now. And some of the ideas are wrong. Some of the ideas are bad. And one of the best things you can do is give yourself a steady diet of D2C nutrition, the stuff that's really good for you. Now, the problem is if you're ignorant, it's really hard to sort out what are the good ideas and what are the bad ideas. If your experiential capital is low, it can be more difficult to sift through those ideas. And this is also where like a great agency partner can be so helpful. Somebody that you really trust and let into your business. Now this is risky because if they're the wrong person, it can be very, very hard. But like somebody who can be let into your business, who can give you really good advice and give you really good guidance. Actually, one of the things I've noticed about my clients when this has happened is that the clients that are successful and have a longer relationship with me, first of all, they see the world the same way as I do. Like they may not be trying to build a huge business. In fact, most of them are not trying to build a huge business, at least not in the very, very short term. I'm probably the wrong fit for them if they want to go really, really fast, really, really big. Okay. But they are trying to base their pursuits around profit. They've really fully internalized the idea that profit is the basis of their valuation, not just growth, right? Now, like the size of your business, the amount of profit is really important for your valuation. So this is where growth can matter a lot. And by the way, there are good arguments at times to grow faster, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But they are ultimately doing anything like that because they care about a bottom line number above everything else. And they're trying to build their business around how do we generate a really big bottom line number. Now that's within whatever constraints of their lifestyle that they want. One client who really wants to spend a couple hours every day outside being active. And he's just like, look, I know I could probably go faster and bigger if I didn't do that, but that's what he wants to do. I love that. I think that's great. So there's some limitation to how quote unquote relentless he's being about pursuing profit, right? But in his business, he's very clear that profit is the goal. And therefore, we have alignment around what we're trying to produce in the business. And therefore, all of the conversations that we have about strategy come back to that shared, very, very clear goal. How do we produce a very big profit number? And that's what we care about. That's what we talk about. That's what we analyze. And now I can serve him really well because I've got some experience that I can bring into the business about how to think about forecasting the business to generate that, how to build an ad strategy that's built around a really true profit first ad strategy, how to think about OpEx and advising around those things, what kind of partners to bring in to other channels in the business, when should we do channel expansion, when should we not, all these questions that are strategic and tactical and everything in between for the business. I can now do that because we're so clear on this. So they are pressing down really hard on relentlessly pursue profit. And the thing is, where their knowledge stops, they've now got a relationship with me where they trust me and they say, like, can you please help me with that? Now, I'm not the only person out there who can do that, right? It happens to be that I've seen 10 years of these businesses. I think I do know how to generate profit in a business. If you have product market fit in some way or another, and you've got these fundamental economics built in a way where this thing can work, yeah, over given enough time, we will keep pursuing this and we will make sure that we doggedly, relentlessly pursue profit. If that happens, I can be a really good guide and my knowledge can cover over theirs. And I think, again, this is just something that's really easy to underestimate. If you in your business are not experiencing profitability in the way that you want, it may be that you need to have some humility and invite somebody in to give you the help that you want to get there, and to invite the right person in. Now, if you want somewhere to start for the best information that I know of for this, that will shield out bad information and help you find good information, look, I hope my podcast can be that for you. This is why I do it. I think it's really, really fun and satisfying, like I said, to do that. Look, I'm biased, but I think my information is mostly right. I think I know how to do it. Okay, so there's that. I'm not the only one who's right, but that's what I'm going for. If I didn't think that, right, I would not keep doing this. Okay, so there's that. But this is also why I push people all the time to admission from Common Thread Collective. I think there's just so many. I get a lot of requests for coaching and things like that. And there's just a lot of them that I have to say no to, or my price is too high, or whatever it is. I keep a pretty small book of business, like I said, not trying to grow a big thing. And so I say no. And so over and over, I send people to admission from Common Thread Collective. And the reason that I do that above everything else is because I believe in the quality of ideas that they have more than anybody else's that I know of. I'm sure the other ones exist, but this is the one that I know where the quality of ideas I completely trust. And what I know is if you're an earlier stage founder and you are at a spot where you're trying to pursue profitability in your business, but your own lack of knowledge is one of the things getting in the way, if you will throw yourself into the information in admission from Common Thread Collective and into the relationships there, because there's a community, into the coaching there, you can get very good price coaching. And I'm going to put my affiliate link for that. It is an affiliate link, so just full disclosure, right? I'm going to put my affiliate link in the show notes here, where you actually get your first coaching call for free. So it's $150 an hour coaching call, and you get the first one for free when you sign up for admission, okay? So I'm going to put my affiliate link there. But the whole reason that I built that affiliate relationship, the whole reason that I do this is, and I send people there, is because I ultimately believe that. And look, if the affiliate thing is going to make you nervous that the only reason I'm recommending this is because I get a little kickback, that's fine. Email me, podcast@ajfgrowth.com. I will set you up with admission, and I will not even take the affiliate fee, because that's how much I believe in it. Okay. So just so you know, okay? But that's why I do it, because I think the quality of information is good. Again, I love how much information there is out there, but I actually think that now the problem is sorting through the good and the bad ideas, and that's a source where I think the ideas are consistently good. And if you can do that and follow what they say, you can get a real jumpstart on the gap between your experiential capital and the experiential capital required to build a really good, profitable business. Okay, so ignorance, bad ideas are part of the problem. Okay, let's talk about another one that is a huge problem for brands that gets in the way of their profitability, and that and is the reason why, again, I say if you relentlessly pursue profit, you will actually get it. Here's something that gets in the way of the relentless pursuit of profit: growth. You probably know that you need better pixel tracking than what is available to you native with the native Shopify Meta Pixel integration. I hope you know that. If you don't know that, let me tell you that right now. You probably do need upgraded pixel tracking to make it so that your Meta Ads dashboard reports data more accurately. Your events manager shows more events being recorded on your website in a post iOS 14.5 environment. And there are a few options out there that do this. All of my clients use BILY. That's BILY. BILY.ai. And they do not use BILY because BILY started sponsoring me. I took BILY as a sponsor because my clients use BILY. They came to me like 6 months before we did a sponsorship and said, we want to show you that we are the best third-party 100% server-side tracking pixel available to any brand out there. We will show you that on your own client accounts. We ran tests. We tested BILY against the native integration. We tested BILY against other third-party integrations and consistently found that BILY had the highest quality event matching and at the same time saw better in-platform results, recorded more results more accurately, even saw one brand have an immediate increase in spend after installing BILY. And so I am a huge fan of BILY. It is also significantly cheaper than all the other options in the marketplace. For many of my listeners, it will basically require you to sell 1 or 2 more products per month for BILY to make financial sense for your business. It is really, really affordable. So go to BILY.ai to get 100% server-side tracking, upgraded pixel tracking, get more accurate data in your Meta Ads dashboard. Get it started right now. This is something I see over and over where brands have a very hard time slowing their growth down. Look, any e-commerce gathering you go to, somebody may start asking the question, oh, how big is your business? And that just illustrates the bit of like pride that you have to be ready to deal with, and the sort of, sense of self that you have to deal with around this question of how big your business is. Nobody ever asks how profitable your business is, partly because it's kind of too personal, right? But they ask how big it is. And I ask that question sometimes because I just want the context. I actually don't care in one sense, like how big the business is. If you're a human, I'm interested in talking to you, right? Because you're valuable just by nature of being a human. So I'm glad to talk to you at any kind of a gathering with that. But what I want to know is the context. Like, what challenges are you probably facing? Well, those are really different for a $100 million business and a $50 million business and a $10 million business and a $1 million business. They're just different challenges in the businesses. And if I'm going to talk to somebody about their business, I like to know the context of what they're dealing with. Okay, so that question might come up. But what I want to illustrate here is when you say that number, it is so easy to attach your sense of self and self-worth to that number. And therefore, sometimes in your mind, slowing your growth or even reversing your growth, like literally going backwards for a year for the sake of profit, even if it's the right move, is incredibly painful. And sometimes it's even just sort of outside your control. Like you just have all this inventory and you have to keep growing. You have to keep selling it just to turn the inventory back into cash, right? So you're just sort of stuck. That can be another problem. But part of it is this, and I want you to be so aware of that reality that growth, the pursuit of growth, can be a direct detriment to your profits. It really can. This is especially true in your ad account, I think. It is so easy to spend bad money to keep growing the business because you feel like you have to keep growing the business. And you want the spend number and the revenue number to go the right way, when actually like the thing you need to do is shave off the worst 20% of your ad spend or 30% of your ad spend. And what that will do is trickle straight to the bottom line, because that 20 to 30% is the least profitable part of your ad spend. And if you just cut that down a little bit, you would slow down a little, but you would actually have a whole bunch more profit, because it's just actually that 20 to 30% is just a pure cost center, right? All it is cost in your business. You're acquiring customers that are losing you money. And that's the reason. And so you need to slow them down, right? But growth can be this really big problem. This internal sense, external sense, whatever it is that is pushing you to grow the business, that can be at the direct cost of profitability. Now, take what I just said about growth and multiply it by 20 if you have investors. If you have to go to your investors and say to them, we are slowing down our growth, in many cases, that will be a very hard conversation. Now, if you have the greatest investors in the world, they will hopefully realize that their investment is going to be valued based on the profit your company produces, not the total revenue number. And so if you can make the case to those great investors, like, hey, we're slowing this down because we're going to create more value in the business by doing this, hopefully they will realize that what you just did for them has made them more money, okay? But that can be incredibly hard. There's all this external pressure. I've seen external boards give revenue numbers that a client has to hit that they're like sort of apart from profit or whatever, and say, okay, go hit this target. And they're just totally and completely unrealistic. And so then they've invested money and they say, well, you're supposed to spend all this money on ads or on inventory or whatever. And that's going to grow your business. And that's going to, forget profitability now. You're going to get there in the future, which again, is another illustration of this idea. If you relentlessly pursue profit, you will never say, forget profitability now, you'll get there in the future. Or if you do, it will be based on a very, very good forecast. Okay, right? Like you have an extreme LTV business. And so you know that that's actually true. But otherwise, in many cases, there will be this external pressure that's really, really hard. And it will require serious mental and emotional fortitude for you to go before your board and say, we're going to slow down. before your investors and say, we're going to slow down. We're going to make a bunch more money by doing it. Trust me, this is going to be much better. Now, a couple of years ago, that would have been the wrong decision. And this is another important point. And this is why actually you need to be ready to deal with and walk with people through these things, right? 5 to 10 years ago, Taylor Holiday's made this point a bunch of times, which is the early wave of e-commerce IPOs, even though a lot of those businesses have turned out to be unprofitable nightmares where their companies have become less and less valuable since the day they IPO'd or whatever, brands that sold, to giant CPG companies or whatever it is, have ended up making been really bad investments for some of those really big acquisitions, whether it's a, private company acquisition or an IPO or whatever. They've been bad investments because in that early wave, they were valued on revenue. They were valued on growth. And the idea was big is good. And it didn't really matter if they made money. And in that case, it was completely rational to disregard everything I'm saying in this episode and say, no, actually what we cared about was growing to a certain amount, continuing to raise money, keep growing the business, keep growing the valuation, and sell at a high valuation. If that's what the market was dictating, I think there's nothing immoral about going and behaving according to what the market did, right? In this case, though, the market's not dictating that. The market's saying for now and for as long as we can see, no, e-commerce businesses are not software businesses. They have some economy of scale, but they do not have software economy of scale. And therefore, we do not want to grow forever at the cost of profitability. We actually need to generate profit. And if you want to sell your business, it's going to be based on profits. And what I have seen over and over is that externally funded brands, especially if they come in with that kind of pressure from their investors, externally funded brands have an extremely hard time turning around and changing strategies mid-course, especially if they raised money 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when it was sort of in between this revenue versus profit valuation stage. And now they're actually, it's all profit. If you started on the grow really fast and don't worry too much about profit phase, it's so hard to make the switch. Sometimes literally, again, you just have too much inventory. And so it's just, you can't slow down, or you have to really have a really hard time. I actually watched one business do this incredibly well, where they were grow, try and sell. The rug got pulled out from under them right when they were trying to sell the business after they'd had this whole mentality. And then they had all this inventory on hand, and suddenly they were running out of money and they couldn't finish the sale because that market condition changed right at the wrong time. I mean, just right at the wrong time. And they took a couple of years, changed the whole business, and now they're actually profitable and doing really well. And it's really impressive, right? They've been able to change the whole thing around by doing all that. So, but it's really hard, really painful. The CEO ate it for a long time. It was very tough for him. I've talked to him about it. I think it was a very difficult decision. So growth can be a really big challenge. Now, at the same time, I want to say something else, which is that it's possible that you should keep growing even at a short-term loss, sometimes because of the LTV. And this is actually one thing, if you're relentlessly pursuing profit, you might be saying, I know this business gets more profit at $100 million than it does at 10. And I want the profit number to be as big as possible because that's what my valuation is based on. So I am going to reinvest my dollars into marketing over a long period of time instead of paying a big tax and give 40% of it to Uncle Sam every year at the end of it. I'm going to reinvest into marketing because that's the best use of my money to generate the profit outcome that I want. There is an argument to do that at times. That's really different than saying grow apart from profit. It's really different than that. It's actually built off of a plan and a strategy and clarity to those things. And so you can do that, and that can be a really reasonable thing as well. But you need to know exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, what the timeline is, how you're thinking about the tax calculation, all those kinds of things. All right. Lastly, there's the silent killer of the relentless pursuit of profit, and it's really around this idea of relentlessness. It's the idea that at some point, inertia becomes a problem. You end up with just this issue where you just can't keep doing the whack-a-mole game to the cost centers in your business that you feel like you should be doing. At some point, you just accept your ROAS and your ad account as something you'll never beat, and you just kind of keep spending on it. And you're tired of shopping a million agencies and trying to find the right freelancer or the hire or whatever who can actually generate this better. And so you just kind of accept it. Or another one I've seen commonly, right, is I think, again, this is a Taylor Holiday phrase, but e-commerce lifestyle bloat. Sometimes this is software where suddenly you just keep adding software and nobody's really paying attention, and your Klaviyo bill gets really big and nobody ever downgrades it, and it's just kind of an unmanaged thing that nobody really notices. That happens. Or even the lifestyle bloat side of it more is suddenly you're just going on more client trips, your photo shoots are getting more expensive, you just go, yeah, this is what we need to do. Bigger brands pay more for these kinds of photo and video or whatever. Now, look, you may need to pay more for photo and video. It may be a good investment for your brand. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. What I'm saying is know exactly why you're doing it. If your OpEx starts to kind of tick up and up and up and up and up, that's the lifestyle bloat idea. Suddenly, the Prius that you're driving is not good enough for you, and you got to drive a Mercedes, right? So to speak, quote unquote. And I mean, maybe that's actually what you do, right? But that can happen in your business in all kinds of ways. And this little inertia takes over where you just get tired of pursuing these sorts of things. There's this great book called The Outsiders. I actually referenced it in my episode of Drew Fallon a couple weeks ago about some of these financial principles as well, where this writer profiles a bunch of large company CEOs whose companies had performed very, very well relative to market. Public companies relative to the market over a long period of time. And one of the things that he notes about a lot of them is that a lot of them just hate bad costs. They just aren't the businesses that go and build monster offices, and the cushiest kind of things, and they're flying private everywhere or whatever, right? They just hate that stuff. They tend to be lean. They tend to be careful. Not all of them, but because they just know that putting up a very large profit number, even at that level of business over, in the time that he was doing that, was going to generate value in the business. And they just hated unnecessary costs in their business. And so they just pursued those. Inertia is something to really watch out for. You just start accepting things as the way they are instead of going stop, don't launch that product. It's not good enough. Change what you're doing. Stop accepting the manufacturer terms that are bad. We need to go renegotiate that. And you keep staying relentless in your pursuit of those things. And what is united in all of those things I just laid out is this idea of relentlessness. If you actually keep saying every day, I am trying to generate a great bottom line in this business. If you do that, you will push through almost all the things that I just said most of the time, right? Maybe all of them. Some of them will pop up. It's really hard to do this exceptionally all the time, right? It's easier said than done. I can sit here and lay them out in a podcast, but it's a lot harder to execute. But it can be done. It can be done if you are able to just keep pursuing those things. So there's more to be said about this, and I'm going to probably have some future episodes where I dive into some more of these kinds of things. But the relentless pursuit of profit is a strong enough central tenet in a business that wants to produce a very high valuation in e-commerce, in D2C, that if you do that, and you really let that thought lead you to where it should lead you, if you follow it all the way down, you can produce very profitable e-commerce businesses. You can produce a very, very good business, even if it isn't that big. You can produce a very, very good business. I know because I see it with my clients. I've watched it happen over and over. You just have to stay relentless. All right, thanks so much for watching, for listening. If you're pursuing profit in your business, don't forget to visit both of my sponsors. That's why I bring them on this show, because I think they will make your business more profitable. I really do. I use them myself. That's why I know that. So that's more staffing. Virtual assistants can be helpful. Virtual professionals can change your business. Go to morenow.co/AF. and go to BILY.ai to get upgraded 100% server-side tracking for your meta ads. I use BILY as the pixel provider for all of my clients, and you should do the same thing. It's an incredible value. It's incredible software. If you like this episode, I would be so grateful if you would share it with somebody else who also would like it. That's the number one way you can say thanks to me for any content that you have gotten value from. And of course, you can also reach out to me at find everything I'm doing at ajfgrowth.com. You can email me podcast@ajfgrowth.com, or reach out to me on Twitter @AndrewJFerris. I would love to hear from you. I'd love any questions you have, any thoughts you have. Thinking about putting together another AMA episode, and so just need to know what the topic should be. So hit me up with any thoughts on that. Please do that. I would love to hear from you. Thanks as always for watching, for listening. Talk to you next time.